politically messy moment. I think we're all aware of that. Russia isn't a huge producer of LPG, but it is a big producer of natural gas, and it's cutting off natural gas flows into Europe, not just Western Europe, but Eastern Europe, Western Europe. So what we're seeing now is a lot of LPG coming primarily from North America that would have gone into Africa or into Latin America is being diverted towards Europe to replace the industrial applications that can be replaced. And the Europeans can simply price out African markets and Latin American markets and Caribbean markets, you know, even further afield to Asian markets. And so we think that if this is prolonged, and particularly as we're going into the Northern Hemisphere winter, then there's a chance that the communities that had switched recently to LPG and are very price sensitive will end up switching back to some form of biomass or to an alternative fuel.
Maybe you can turn to Mohammed and wondering if you can tell us about your role at Consumers' Choice and what you work on there.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, I'll add what you just said. Congratulations to this fantastic event that you're having here. Okay, my name is Mohammed Kadhi. I'm a director in Consumers' Choice Limited. I'll be talking mainly on an East African aspect because Consumers' Choice as a company has branches in Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. And we have branches in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And we started the ethanol stove business in Kenya, actually, although it's a Tanzanian company. And when we launched in Kenya, that was way back in 2011, we were actually importing ethanol stoves and ethanol gel from Tanzania and selling it into Kenya. And we ended up being the largest distributors of ethanol stoves in Kenya. So at one time, we realized that why can't we set up business here in Kenya on producing the ethanol in Kenya? And we realized that there was excise duty on denatured ethanol. And normally the denatured ethanol does not attract excise duty. So we lobbied from 2011 to about 2015 with a lot of assistance from the World Bank, an organization called Kenya Climate Innovation Center. And finally, we convinced government to remove the excise duty on denatured ethanol. And after that, there was a mushroom of ethanol clean cooking technologies. And I mean, I think most of you have heard of Cocoa Networks. They came into the country and they've taken ethanol into a big issue in the region, especially in Kenya. So basically, in Tanzania, we won a tender, a government tender, UNIDO and government of Tanzania tender to distribute 100,000 stoves in Dar es Salaam. Why? Because mainly Dar es Salaam consumes 50% of all the charcoal that is produced in Tanzania, which is unsustainable. So that's why they've introduced the ethanol stove. And basically, that's an introduction of us.
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned excise duties there. How does trade policy kind of influence your work to satisfy demand for ethanol technologies and fuels? And what are the kinds of barriers that you encounter either in Kenya or in Tanzania that make it more challenging to do that?
Okay, you'd find that in markets, I'll talk about all three countries because we're involved all everywhere. You'll find that in Kenya, for instance, the demand for ethanol stoves has really shot up thanks to the cocoa and other players. Where we are talking about having over 700,000 stoves in the country, and the demand for ethanol is big. But Kenya does not produce a lot of ethanol. So the ethanol comes in from Uganda and from Tanzania. So those fortunately, there is the East African Trade Agreement, whereby things kind of flow smoothly. But then we have a problem of bottlenecks at the border, whereby you'd have your trucks stuck there for like a week. And that negatively affects the supply chains all over the place. So it is important to have a harmonized trading issue policies across within the country first and foremost, and then across the region. Right now, as we speak, Tanzania is now we have a new president. When she was vice president, she was in charge of issues of environment. Now she's the president. She's really focused on issues of clean cooking. In fact, at the end of this month, there's going to be a launch of the clean cooking policy of Tanzania, which we are looking forward to. And in Tanzania, for instance, we are having big challenges with issues of charcoal. In fact, the whole region, issues of charcoal, which, you know, charcoal is not subsidized. It is not regulated. And when one country, like for instance, when one country bans the use of one product, they illegally get into the other countries. So it's good to have harmonized trade issues as a country and regionally.
Right. So if Kenya's going to kind of restrict the production and use of charcoal, but Tanzania doesn't, you kind of create those flows across borders if there's no harmonization there.
And then you find out that, like for instance, Kenya banned the use of charcoal. They banned the cutting down of trees.
Yeah.
So all the charcoal was coming in from the neighboring countries.
Yeah.
So that negatively affects those countries.
Yeah.
And it's a vicious cycle. So that that's why it's important to have harmonized trading policies. That if this country says that this is, I mean, if say Ghana says that this is going to happen, Nigeria says it's going to happen, this countries, once, you know, then that you have a harmonized system that brings to.
And maybe a similar question as I asked Michael about geopolitical events. How has the market for bioethanol changed over the last couple of years since we've been through, Ukraine, but maybe more importantly, COVID, and how that has changed demand for ethanol?
Well, before COVID, the international prices of ethanol were quite low, and it was affordable to actually. Oh, sorry, let me just wait for him. Thank you.
Sorry about that. It was right in my ear.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
At least you're comfortable.
Sorry.
Now.
Yes. How the market for ethanol has changed over the last few years.
Okay. Some of the players in the ethanol cooking field were importing ethanol from the international market before COVID. That is pre-2019. No, pre-2020 actually. And at that time, ethanol was quite cheap. And the cost of transporting it, maybe from the States or from Brazil or from India or from South Africa, was quite cheap, at that time. It was economic. You could bring in ethanol and sell it locally. But today, after COVID, prices of everything almost tripled. Shipping costs skyrocketed. Then to make matters worse, COVID came, we controlled COVID. Then the Ukraine crisis. And now that has really affected shipping costs. It has also affected cost of production, making stoves. It has, so what has happened is that now we have had to look within to get the ethanol. Because now we've realized that getting ethanol within the East African region is cheaper. And the demand for ethanol has within the sugar factories in East Africa has risen. So one thing, I don't want to say that what has happened internationally is bad, but it has created a demand for ethanol in the local market. Yes.
And if that regional supply, and I'm curious to kind of understand, are there certain countries that have a kind of comparative advantage in producing ethanol in the region? But curious whether or kind of if that regional supply is to become viable, what kinds of changes do you see being necessary in trade policy and in harmonization of policies within the region? What can be done by governments to really kind of support that growing regional industry?
Right now, countries like Kenya have really gone pro-ethanol. I think there's even a country map of how to go into ethanol business. One of the key issues, if you're going to have a sustainable industry in ethanol as a cooking fuel, is to have policies, trading policies, and incentives to grow feedstock, especially cassava. In East Africa, cassava is not a main staple food as it is here in West. And we are also looking at introducing, in Tanzania, for instance, we are one of the largest producers of cashew nuts. Okay? So the cashew apple, the fruit itself, is normally thrown away, or it makes a local brew, a very stiff brew. That actually can produce ethanol, okay? And we're talking about University of Dar es Salaam has done studies, and we're looking at a potential of producing up to 90 million liters per year from that waste. So government is now looking at policies of incentivizing people to put up micro distilleries within Tanzania. I do know in Kenya that they have started doing pilots. There's an organization called Giraffe, where they've already started piloting and doing cassava, and there are incentives to do that. So yeah, Uganda has a lot of, I think there are about 19 distilleries. Uganda is the largest producer of ethanol in the region. So there are incentives. In Tanzania right now, we have 5 huge sugar factories, but only one of them produces ethanol, which we source our ethanol from them. So what is happening now is that government also wants to incentivize all the other sugar factories to start putting up distilleries for production of ethanol, not as a beverage, but as a cooking fuel. So those are some of the incentives that are being put in place regionally. Yeah.
And you know, if there was more robust regional trade for ethanol in East Africa, what do you think that would mean for demand for ethanol as a cooking fuel?
One thing is that already a company like Cocoa, okay, has created a huge awareness, okay. So now everybody is looking, okay, everybody wants that. So other companies have come into the fore. Like we are working with a company called Clean Cook from Sweden. Now Sweden, they don't manufacture the stove locally. I mean, they were manufacturing the stove in South Africa. But the trade of ethanol stoves is really catching up in East Africa. So they've transferred the factory from the people who are producing the stoves from South Africa, Durban, to Nairobi. There's a big company called Ban Manufacturing. Now, Ban Manufacturing will be contract manufacturing the ethanol stoves. And now within the East African region, which you don't pay import duties, there's nothing. So it'll be much cheaper to do business within the area. I don't know whether I've answered your question properly.
Great. No, that's super helpful. Maybe we'll move on to Diana. Maybe, there you go. Yeah. Okay. Maybe you can tell us about your role at the Ministry of Trade and Industry and why clean cooking is important in the national context for Ghana and what Ghana is doing to increase clean cooking.
Thank you very much. My name is Diana Friado, and I work with Ministry of Trade and Industry. Currently, I'm heading a unit called Business Regulatory Reform Unit at Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Oh, sorry. And yeah, maybe if you can tell us a little bit about why clean cooking is important in the national context for Ghana and what Ghana is doing to increase access to clean cooking.
All right. Thank you very much. if you take clean cooking, we all know that somebody will say, with or without any research, we know it's good. And we are looking at the one energy that we are using, how safe they are. Let's say conservation of the forest is also key. Job creation is key. The health-wise, recently I traveled to my hometown, and when I saw the way they were cooking, I was like, wow. So we have to get them another stove for them to move from the use of the charcoal to use the stove. So it's very good when health-wise is very important. And what Ghana is doing now, I know the minister has been here already. What Ghana is doing now, one is to make sure that we get more the production of ethanol, and they also encourage companies to produce the ethanol and then the cylinders. At first, we were having only one company producing cylinders in Ghana. And now we have a company under the One District, One Factory program producing cylinders. And what comes to mind is, economically, a lot of people don't have money to buy the bigger cylinders. So we discussed with this company, and what he's doing, he's coming out to the smaller sizes. So, and it's helping the women, the people in the village community, the women to be able to afford the cylinders. It's not going to be easy for now. Somebody will say cost-wise, some of us will prefer the bigger one. But immediate impact for the women to be able to, for more people to be able to afford the smaller cylinders is really helping. And they've done it in such a way that you use it straight away with your the cylinder underneath, the fire on it, and it's mobile. Let me put it that way. It's mobile. People are easily able to afford it, and they're able to use it. And then with the production of the ethanol, also under the One District, One Factory program, there's another company, a very big company now, producing ethanol in Ghana. And there's another one in Ashanti region, one in the Volta region. And to the best of my knowledge, the one in the Volta region wants to move to the Eastern region to produce a very big cassava farm, to be able to produce in large quantity for the usage. When you come to the imports, we don't have restrictions per se. We don't have restrictions. But somebody will say maybe the easy access and the easy coming in. And that one affects all the importation, trade facilitation issues. So what we are doing with the customs and the other agencies and the trade facilitation team at the Ministry of Trade and Industry, why don't we do a time release study? How people are able to bring goods into Ghana, how they're able to clear it, be it the time for clearing, the time for them to get their product. So that's what we are also doing to be able to facilitate trade along that side. And to the best of my knowledge, in the energy side, the Bank of Ghana is working with them, the private sector, to get them dollar for them to be doing the importation. For that one is being done. And the Ministry of Energy is doing a lot. That's why I said the minister has been there. So, and is working with a ministry. So there's an agency under the Ministry of Trade and Industry called Ghana Enterprise Agency. It used to be National Board for Small Scale Industries. So it's also working with them. Those who we cannot move, because as of now, 70% of the rural community is still using firewood. How best can we help them, if not the firewood, and they are moving to even the ethanol or to stove? How best can they be economical in the use of the charcoal, and or they won't be abuse the cutting down of the trees? So a lot of people, the artisanal, they've been trained to come out to the modern ones. And when I was coming, I was checking around. Some of them I've just seen adverts. I saw one here. And I said, this is really a good program. And I must say, putting a program like this together, sometimes it's not easy. But I see how the enthusiasm and everything that your team have done is going to help us as a nation as well to see that it's not only for Ghana, it's not only for Africa, it's important to the whole world that we all live healthy.
Yeah. Great. And you know, when it comes to products like that are socially beneficial, like clean cooking technologies and fuels, what are the benefits sort of at a national level for increasing the flows, for reducing those trade barriers? What does Ghana stand to gain by making it easier for the flow of those products to happen?
For the flow, now, let me say, for COVID, we've all realized that depending on the importation alone is not the best for the country. So, in as much as there's no restriction when it comes to LPG or cylinder, anything, there's no restriction now. But why can't you also do homegrown factories to produce, to enable citizens to get it as easy as practicable? So I think that is the government policy now, in as much as there's no restrictions for importation. But COVID has taught us that you cannot depend only on imports for such commodities. Because if not, when there's COVID, nobody's importing, how do you survive? So the homegrown companies is what is being advocated now as we continue to allow people to import.
Yeah, great. That's a good segue into the next question. So, I mean, clean cooking just generally is an immature industry, but if we think of it in terms of an individual country like Ghana, what is it that you think country governments can do to ensure that the business environment and that the trade environment is conducive to growing the clean cooking industry?
Let me put it this way, that making business conducive for all businesses is good. Maybe for the program of this sort is an infant, but clean cooking has been on the drawing board for Ghana since 1990, to the best of my knowledge. That was where this energy conversation started. And the research that I have also done, the programs that I have been part some years ago, consistently encouraging us to be able to use clean cooking to cook, because we cook a lot. We do all sorts of things, and we use charcoal, and as we continue to use charcoal and continue to use firewood, we are not doing good to the environment as well. So how best can we save our environment and also eat has been on the drawing board for all these years. And 2010, I know there was a policy from the Ministry of Energy that encouraging people, and then I think with the World Bank as well, encouraging people to do clean cooking. It's not out. Okay. Thank you. With the World Bank encouraging people to go into clean cooking. So it has been on the drawing board for years. But for the policies, I will encourage that we meet the Minister of Environment again, because it's something that is ongoing. It's an ongoing program. It has never stopped in this country. So it's the impact. In as much as we want to encourage a lot of people to use the LPG, there's also the cost implication and accessibility. Somebody may wish to buy it, but how accessible are these things to them? And some years ago, it was difficult for you, let's say if you are in my hometown, to get it. You have to join a bus, travel very far. Now you have to travel all the same, but it's not as far as it used to be. So encouraging the private sector, also investing into even the distribution to the nearest community is also helping. And that has been, setting up the filling stations, the gas filling station closer to the community has really helped.
Great, thank you. And I want to kind of change tack a little bit, maybe, and just ask you about, I know you work quite closely with the Ghana Association of Women Entrepreneurs. And, you know, the gender impact of clean cooking is pretty obvious, but, you know, we as a community, of course, need to do more to increase the role of women across the value chain in clean cooking. I'm curious what kind of additional barriers you've seen women experience and women entrepreneurs experience when it comes to importing goods, exporting goods, and just, you know, starting and running a business here in Ghana.
The major cost is funding. The major cost is funding, and some of them they may not need huge capital to start, but how to manage their business is key. How to manage business is key. And when it comes to clean cooking, some years ago, we used to organize programs for women entrepreneurs. And at that program, at any point in time, we will advise them how important it is also to do clean cooking. But the challenge, basically, is financial. The challenge has always been financial. But somebody will say, if it is important to you, you will save to get it. If it is important to you, and that's why we're also educating them, not only the financial side, the health implication of using firewood and other things in cooking. You are inhaling. You don't know the type of wood that is being used that you are even inhaling into yourself. And that is why we are educating them that for health, for your own health, try to move from this or minimize this and move to this. So that is the education that we've been giving to them.
Great. Thank you. I think we might have some time for questions from the audience. Actually, maybe if I take this. Sure, yeah, go ahead.
I think in the private sector, but one thing that I've realized is that for promotion of clean cooking technologies in different parts of the world, I mean, he's just mentioned just now, India. The Prime Minister Modi has pushed, it's a political will, you know, that is there, that if there's a political will to push certain policies, because in Africa, there are policies for clean cooking, but if the political will is not there, for instance, you find in Uganda, there's a company called Bukona Agro-Processors, and the president of that country, President Museveni, was really interested in what is happening there. And that has really pushed the growth of ethanol stoves. In Kenya, again, it was the past president, and clean cooking, especially in ethanol, has gone up. Today in Tanzania, there's now a new cooking policy, and the president, she is really keen on this. And so a lot of, if there's a political will, trade policies also, everything just comes into place. So maybe that's what I wanted to add. Yeah.
Any questions for our panelists? Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Clement Ntawaz. I work for Livaning, which is a non-government organization based in Mozambique, and also promoting clean cooking stove. My question goes to my sister there. It was not quite clear when she was explaining. Perhaps she have already said this, but there was a noise from outside, and the volume as well was not quite loud, and I couldn't hear clearly. I just wanted to understand whether there is a sort of incentive that the government provides, the Ghanaian government provides for the local entrepreneurship, like women, for instance, when it comes to the importation of the clean cooking equipment or technology. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. As I said earlier, under the program that the government is running, One District, One Factory, There's an incentive for all those who do production, ethanol, the cylinder production. There's an incentive for that. Are you clear with that? Oh, did you hear me?
Yes, yes. But what kind of incentive?
Oh, okay. You want to know specific incentive? All
Yes.
right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Under this program, if somebody sign up as one district, one factory, if you are a citizen of Ghana, what you get is you get the interest rate that you get from the bank. You get 50% paid for you from the government. That is one. Two, whether you are Ghanaian or not, the machines that you import, you will use to produce the ethanol or the establishment of the company, you get exemption for the duty. That is number two. Number three, the raw material, in case, apart from maybe the cassava and other things, if you are to add any raw materials and you need them from outside the continent, you definitely need to import. At that time, that raw material, you pay 5% of the duty instead of the normal duty that other people pay. So that is an incentive for all those under this project. And then now we are promoting the production of the cylinders and ethanol as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Hello?
Just say your name and the organization you're with as well.
Hello? Yeah. I'm Samuel from Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. So I have three questions. So the first question, I would want to find out if the Ghanaian government is looking towards synthetic ethanol, because for bioethanol, the ramifications on biodiversity are huge. And if you are, I want to know if there is that conscious engagement of academia to be able to produce, to be able to produce synthetic ethanol.
Synthetic.
Two questions. Thank you.
Do you want to take the other questions?
For this one, I can't confirm or otherwise, but to the best of my knowledge, all ministries work with academians and the private sector. But I can't confirm or otherwise unless I get to Ministry of Energy.
Mohammed, do you want to say anything about just you're talking there about the food security and biodiversity
Yes.
challenge with ethanol feedstocks. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah,
Food security.
currently, I'll give you an East African perspective. You'd find that governments would not allow production of ethanol from maize because that concerns food security. But sugarcane, we produce sugar. The byproduct of sugar production is molasses. And from that molasses is what we make ethanol. So that at least there's no waste there, all right? And that the molasses, the bagasse, actually runs the boilers to produce electricity. So there's no waste there, right? In countries like in Kenya, in Tanzania, we are looking at using waste to energy. The cashew apple fruit from cashew nuts. There is a potential of producing 90 million liters in Tanzania. So I don't know about synthetic, but it's a way of we are looking at a way of producing ethanol from the local resources and empowering the community and the farmers. Yeah.
So the final one was whether the ministry is tracking the numbers in terms of where the majority of our ethanol production is coming from locally. Are we doing the tracking of the numbers?
Tracking.
Yes. So just to have a fair idea, okay, this region of the country is giving us the majority of the production. So we know where probably funding could be going towards. Thank you.
To the best of my knowledge, those using cassava, the current big factory is in the Volta region. And I know one is in the closer to Mampong, so that one is in Ashanti region. Then the one is starting at Eastern region. And as for cassava, you know, Ghana, most of our regions, they can produce in large quantity. So for now, that's what I know. The biggest to Kumasi and Volta region.
Hello, Christine Espinosa from World Central Kitchen. My question's for Michael Kelly. I know that the association creates policy recommendations that they hand over to governments, but my question out of curiosity is, what is some policies that you've seen that have been prohibited in adoption in different areas?
Like what kind of policies?
A policy that makes it too hard for people to grow their own cannabis.
Thanks, Christina.
I think, look, I mean, the way governments constructs policies is a little bit art and a little bit magic and a little bit science. So I'll give you a politician's answer, which is to answer without answering and say it depends on the country and what they're trying to achieve. We find in a lot of developing countries there's legacy policies that have been left over that simply haven't been weeded out of the regulation, the regulatory structure, the political, the policy architecture, if you will. That happens a lot. And these kind of dead policies kind of hang in the system and prohibit the kind of agility that would allow a market to really take root and grow. In some markets, like Brazil is a great example. Brazil is a fantastic LPG market. 90% of Brazilians cook on LPG. Very big market, and they have a policy which prohibits the use of LPG for a transportation fuel. And the reason for that is because they don't want to compete with their ethanol, their local ethanol business. So that's been layered into the policies. It doesn't make a lot of sense anymore, but it's something that's still there. We as an institution, we encourage countries that are trying to incentivize the growth of an LPG market to look at their complete policy portfolio, you know, from top to bottom, and we offer suggestions on what they can do to streamline policies in a way that will incentivize growth and will create a disciplined market, because it's important that the market be disciplined so that it be safe.
Any others? We probably have time for one or two more.
Marie Delbrier, I'm a consultant. A question for you, maybe a little bit provocative. What do you think of those big companies like Burn Manufacturing or in the past and Verifit, I mean, which have international markets? So in a country like Ghana, I mean, when you would like to promote local manufacturing of cook stoves, what do you think of import of those stoves coming from outside and which have standardized quality and which could be good also for the market, for the local markets?
Thank you very much. You are referring to standards, isn't it? Standard. Yeah, the two big, the big one, other than one district, one factory, just being integrated, and I can assure you it's a high quality product. The one that I've been using all these years, the company was established by our first president, and it has been producing a very high quality cylinders in Ghana for years. And the importation is a supplementary, let me put it that way. So for quality, it's undisputable. We are having a quality cylinder. Even most of the ones that are being seized normally by the standard authority are the imported ones. Because when they get to know that it doesn't meet the standard, they will seize it and they will burn it. It won't get into the country. So, and most of them is the imported one. But the factory that was established years ago, before some of us were born, is producing very high cylinder in Ghana. And for production of food, I must say, is one of the. I traveled to the Volta region recently, and I was looking at the vast land over there. I was like, oh, wow. And cassava production, any part of that region, you can produce high quality, and you can get high yields from there. So it's undisputable when it comes to our food, and we shouldn't complain of shortage of food. I was telling my husband. But we also need it, because if we depend so much on importation, on some of these things, you know the currency. Already our currency is struggling. So that is why we are encouraging people to produce some of the things that we can easily produce. Because when the manufacturing sector develops, our economy will expand. Because now the economy is so small to employ a lot of people. But when the manufacturing sector expands, then the economy will expand. We'll get employment for other people too. So that's why we're encouraging employment, manufacturing. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to ask a question regarding the circulation of the LPG and the incentive given to the ethanol manufacturing companies. I'd like to know, is there any other provision for companies that produce, I'm talking in relation to Ghana, that produce cook stoves, especially where the focus is more on the rural dwellers? Because in your submission, you mentioned that you went to your hometown and like the stove they were using, So per the little research I have, looks like the rural areas here, they are more closer to the forest areas. And so entering the forest is easy. Cutting the wood is easy. So with the incentive regarding the ethanol, the LPG, how are you also reaching to these rural areas so that they can also have access to these LPG and ethanol? Because I know that they have a myth regarding LPG. Yes. And so they rather prefer the charcoal cook stove, though it's not that cleaner, but at least it limits the cutting down of trees. So how is the ministry, through its work, helping in that area as well, so they can also have access to clean cooking? Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you look at the statistics that I'm having now, this one is the report from the Ghana Statistical Service. You can see at least there's movement from charcoal going a little, and even the rural community, the gas going little, but more is on the charcoal. So that's why I said, under the Ministry of Trade and Industry, Ghana Enterprise Agency, we've supported the small-scale artisanals. You know, that kind of coal pot that doesn't use lots of charcoal. That is what we've also supported. Lots of people. Now you see lots of people, producers, moving into that. Yeah.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question. So aside the incentive you give, do you have advocacy programs as well in helping in the shifts from the unsustainable way to a more sustainable way? Aside the incentive, your ministry, through Ghana Enterprises, yes, do you have awareness programs to help encourage them shift from?
Yeah, the awareness program normally being organized by Ministry of Energy and Energy Commission. They do the awareness program. We do the business and then the trading aspect. But when we go for meetings, we educate them. But the national sensitization program is under the Ministry of Energy.
Do you want to add something more?
She asked the same question, but what I was just going to say is that for the rural folk, and even the folk in the cities, it's behavior change campaign is very important to be able to educate the masses of the people, the population, the ills of using charcoal vis-a-vis using cleaner technologies. Like us in the ethanol area, we actually quantify that if you use this amount of charcoal and this amount of ethanol, you save so much here. You have to show them the economic sense. Really, when you talk too much about the health, then they want to know about, am I saving money? So, and that's why LPG is doing so well, because a cylinder would last like, maybe a month or something more. But
Michael, yeah?
That's true, but one of the challenges in developing countries is that upfront costs. So the price of the deposit of a cylinder, particularly if they're large cylinders, it's often prohibitive for people at the bottom of the income scale. And I think that's where countries like India have done a lot of work on innovative types of subsidies, direct subsidies to the consumer, often just to the woman of the household. And that's something that they pioneered so that it doesn't go to the men, and men will do dumb things with money. But it goes straight to the women, and it gets used for what it's supposed to be used for in terms of gas. But this innovation to help people get access to that first upfront cost is extremely important. I'd also reiterate what was said about the education piece. And discussing health with people isn't necessarily a great driver. It's more economics. If you can convince people that they'll save money and it'll improve their health. But the first point is that they'll save money. That's usually the bigger incentive.
Great, thanks, Michael. I think we'll have to leave it there. If you can join me in thanking the panelists.
Let's give the moderator a round of applause, too.
And again, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back in here for a panel on talent. Great, thank you.